This is Sharon Kendrew, President and CEO of High Road Incorporated, and you're listening to the business side of music.
Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Can we get serious now?
One thing that did happen during the 60s was some music of an unusual or experimental nature did get recorded and did get released. Now look at who the executives were in those companies at those times. Not hip young guys. These were cigar-chomping old guys who looked at the product that came and said, I don't know. Who knows what it is? Record it, stick it out. If it sells, all right. We were better off with those guys than we are now with the supposedly hip young executives who are making the decisions of what people should see and hear in the marketplace.
Success in the music business begins with a dream, a vision. This podcast will give you, the listener, the insight and tools to turn that vision into a reality. Meet the industry professionals who work day by day behind the scenes, helping to make those dreams come true. Welcome to the business side of music.
In the studio with us today here in Nashville, Tennessee, sitting across the podcast table. This is going to be actually a very different interview than we normally do because of your background, but more importantly, what you're literally bringing to the table, which is a book, which I actually found very interesting. Quite the story that you've created. Phillip Kriz is sitting across from us. He was born and raised in El Paso, Texas. He discovered music through his parents. Beyond spinning classics by Led Zeppelin and Bob Dylan, his mom even played Howard Stern on their drive to school. Predestining a future in the business, she also brought Phillip to his first concert, U2 and Public Enemy at the Sun Bowl. Not to mention he caught Robert Plant and Jimmy Page and Alan Jackson when they rolled through town. However, a Pink Floyd gig would be the point of no return. After a stint in San Antonio, he graduated from Full Sail University in Orlando, where he also worked his first production gigs. He landed his dream job at production powerhouse Claire Global. Coming full circle, his first assignment placed him on a jaunt with Guns N' Roses in 2010. He hit the road for a better part of the next decade. His clients have included Alicia Keys, The Scorpions, Justin Bieber, Florida Georgia Line, Paul Simon, Carrie Underwood, and Queen with Adam Lambert, to just name a few. At the onset of the global pandemic, the business shut down as we all know it. He found himself home at Nashville. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Bob.
You've got quite the history, and of course, a lot of the people that we have on the show have that same pedigree of being out on the road and touring. But we're talking about something a little different here today, aren't we?
Yeah, we are.
You have turned into an author.
I have. Yeah.
And this is your first book?
This is. Yeah, definitely. I always wanted to write something, so this was great that I finally had a chance to write something.
The book is called The Roadie Cartel, which opens up a whole new can of worms, if you ask me, because sometimes truth is stranger than fiction.
Yeah.
Was that part of the case here?
This was completely fiction, but I've always been a what if kind of person. Like,
names changed to protect the innocent? Or?
There's definitely no one in the book that could be taken as someone that I've actually worked with.
Right.
But there's definitely stories in there that I've mended and twisted and turned. And, there's nothing actually fictional or there's nothing real in there. It's all a fiction tale.
Yeah. You started out as a roadie and a band assistant. And, of course, when we all get into that world, we become trusted tour confidants.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stories that are out there. And, of course, sometimes it's difficult for us to dictate between fact and fiction.
Right.
Where did the idea of this book, The Roadie Cartel, where did it come from?
Well, I think you're right. Like a lot of people in my travels, at bars or going homes, there was always you should write a book. You should write a book. Well, yeah, I have great stories, but
were they wanting you to write a book on your stories?
Of course.
Yeah.
They wanted an autobiography, but
right.
Let's be real. My stories are great, but they're great bar stories. There's only so much that would translate to paper that would really hold someone's attention. And so at one point when I was on the road, I started to think of a fun, almost like a Seinfeldish American Pie kind of tale of a roadie going through life, because there's so many ups and downs. But my tale, I've signed too many NDAs over the years and too many things that really, at the end of the day, it was kind of boring.
Right.
So when I actually had a chance to sit down and think of a new story, it hit me. I was like, I've always loved like crime thrillers. I've always loved the twists and the turns, and comedy, you can only do so much.
And you have to be really good at it.
And you have to, I think it takes a team to write comedy.
Yeah. Timing is everything when it comes to comedy.
Absolutely. And I knew that I had some wild ideas just from stories and moments in situations where I was like, what if this changed just by a fraction? Or who really is doing this? Or what if this really was possible? And so when the world shut down and I had nothing but time on my hand, I really let my imagination just go to a different place. And let's be real, I think everybody's interested in backstage life and everybody's interested in the cartel world. They're two very interesting places.
It's so interesting that you bring that up, because I'm not necessarily big on crime novels or crime stories. My wife worked in law enforcement for 26 years, so I've heard it all. I've heard all the stories.
Yeah.
But I have to admit, when it comes to like Netflix, Narcos.
Yeah.
I mean, I've probably watched that series, and Narcos Mexico. I've probably watched 3-4 times each. It really, I don't want to say entrancing is maybe the word, but you kind of get into it and you go, wow, there's this whole other world. And in realistic sense, the music business is somewhat like the cartel because it's all family.
Yeah. Definitely. And it's run by someone at the top that hands down orders to a whole slew of other people that you really don't know what is really getting said or done, but you just know that we all kind of fit into this shoe. And so growing up on the border of Juarez, Mexico, and El Paso, I grew up seeing things my entire life that were always questionable. Then when I got in the music business, everything was questionable. And it was a great industry to be in, but once I was kind of done in a weird, like forcibly done, I was like, wow, this is really strange to me because I'd never thought it could happen. And I think a lot of like crime is that same way. You think you can get away with it for so long and nothing is ever going to happen, and then bam, it's done.
Your writing background, this is obviously your first book, The Roadie Cartel. Did you do writing in school, or were you kind of a novice, or maybe I should say kind of a hobbyist when it came to writing? Or
I actually was one of the worst students ever. And I was bad at sending text messages. I always got grammar corrected, and my spell, thank gosh for, spell check on iPhones and all that stuff, because, and that worried me at first, but in reality with technology today and the process of writing, all I had to do was lay out the story. And it was really cool. Once I started to lay out the story, all the other stuff kind of fit in. So I didn't really have any background. I just sat down, and crazy enough is it all started because I heard Jack Carr say that he went from being a Marine to writing novels. And I was like, well,
and he was a Navy SEAL, wasn't he?
Yeah, Navy SEAL, sorry.
Yeah, okay.
I was like, well, if he can do it, then why can't I do it? And so it really was more just sitting down and trying.
I think everybody has a book in them.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially those of us in the music business, because I'm going through the same thing right now, where everybody said, you've got so many great stories, you need to write a book. We're actually approaching it from a different direction, and not to get off task, but my daughter is hosting a podcast where I'm the guest.
Oh, nice.
And so I'm telling the stories, and maybe someday we'll transform that into a book. But when you started writing the book, you had a basic outline, or was it just free-flowing, or how did that all come together?
Well, it was kind of weird. I had, I think, the name first.
Really?
Yeah. Like, I went on a walk. I listened to that podcast. I came home. That tree had fallen in my front yard.
Okay.
And I told my wife, I was like, I'm going to go cut this tree down. And I got some thinking to do. And I took a handsaw out there. People kept driving by saying, do you want to use our chainsaw? And I was like, no, I'm good. I need this time. That's all we had, right? And I had remembered someone somewhere, maybe my grandma, she loved to write. Maybe it was her. I don't remember where this popped in my brain, but someone said, when I write, I always start at the end. And I was like, huh, okay. And thought of the end and I thought of the beginning. And I figured if I could at least get those two things on paper first, then everything else would fit in. And so that's where it started. I actually wrote the last chapter first.
We're going to take a break, get a word in for a couple of our sponsors. When we come back, we're going to start digging into this book a little bit. I want you to start sharing that cast of characters that you have created. In the studio with us today is Phillip Kriz, who is the author of the book, The Roadie Cartel.
You're listening to the business side of music.
This is Mark Allen Barnett, singer, songwriter, creative coach, and mentor. Are you an artist or songwriter or a family member or friend of someone who is? Are you trying to find your way through the often confusing world of today's music business? I'm here to help. Over the past 40 years, I've written and recorded hit songs, have had more than my share of live performances, and have seen the ups and downs of the music industry and what Music City, also known as Nashville, has to offer. I'm here to share that information with you. The Mark Allen Barnett Songwriting Tours of Nashville are a one-day to multi-day private interactive workshops developed to help you discover your best approach to songwriting, performing in front of a live audience, along with the correct way to network within the music industry. Our workshops are based around what you need to know. While in Nashville, you get an insight from behind the scenes, learn about the history of Music City, separate fact from fiction, and give yourself or a loved one the time of your life. This workshop makes the perfect gift for someone you love who wants to get their foot in the door of the music business the right way. For more information, go to www.markallenbarnett.com or www.musicchoosesyou.com. Remember, you don't choose music. Music chooses you.
Branding. What is it really? It goes by many names. Marketing, licensing, and image. When in reality, it's 7 key branding formulas that all need to harmonize perfectly. Mess up just one formula and you have compromised the whole brand build. Dead Horse Branding facilitates all 7 formulas under one roof, building, promoting, and marketing all brands at all different stages of their level. We are a marketing team's dream, and we were built to service talent, artist managers, record labels, independent artists, iconic brands, legacy estates, and startups. Rooted in music and seated across other industries like fashion, various talent, hospitality, authors, interior designers, lifestyle brands, and corporate entities. The 7 branding formulas do not discriminate. 7 branding formulas, all in one swift movement. Sick of beating that dead horse? Come to Dead Horse. Please visit us at deadhorsebranding.com or send us an email to info@deadhorsebranding.com.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Back in the studio here in Nashville, Tennessee, sitting across the podcast table is Phillip Kriz, who is the author of a book coming out this year?
Yeah, December 1st.
December 1st, The Roadie Cartel. You mentioned that you had to sign some NDAs in your career, and I think we've all had to do that at one time or another in the business to protect the powers at be. When you started assimilating your cast of characters for this book, and I know you said, nah, it's all fiction, there's no truth. Did you grab different aspects of different people, or was this just a clean slate when you wrote this?
No, there's definitely characteristics of people in the book.
Yeah.
But there's not one specific character that ever fits one, specific
It's an
person.
amalgamation of sorts.
Yeah, definitely. It's like watching a good sitcom. You could be every character depending on how you feel that day, right?
Yeah. So let's talk about the book and you laying it out. Basically, what is the story? It's a fictional novel. Let's clarify that.
It is.
We're not pointing fingers at anybody and saying this actually goes on.
Nope, this is...
It may or may not.
There's definitely tales of roadies and potentially bands trying to bring stuff across the border. I think, that's
never happened.
Yeah, just, let's be real. But I'm talking about on a level of mass drug, trafficking here, and really using the industry as a money laundering scheme is that's like the bigger picture. Is what if you really had this opportunity to launder money through a music business. And
I've got to say, honestly, I've probably personally experienced that happening once or twice when you see a band on stage and, with all of the production and you're going, how did they get here? And then you realize there's somebody funding them, and there's probably some money that's transferring hands that shouldn't be transferring hands. But let's get to the storyline of this book. Let's talk about that.
So I knew that I couldn't just write just about drugs and sex and cartels and killing and all that stuff. There had to be a basis behind it. And so I created 3 characters to be the main base, the start of it. And I didn't want it to just be a very short tale. I wanted it to be like the backstory behind how they even got to who they were, because I thought the deeper story would be, I think inside every person, good or bad, there's that good or bad in us all. And so when I started to really think of this book, it molded itself in a weird way, because it was just a big industry book at first. And then the more I started to like fine tune everything like you would in a show, it started to become a real production inside of its own. And I found that each character, when I would write about them, it was a brother, 2 brothers and a sister, and they left Czechoslovakia and came to America, the American dream, in like the late 60s. And I thought that would be the greatest tie-in, because back then there were no rules to being a roadie. It's kind of a brand new thing.
It really was.
So if I was going to write this book, I couldn't just write it in the perspective of like, in the early 2000s, because there was already too much happening. There was already too many bands on tour. I really had to dive down to the beginning. And if you were going to control the music industry from the start, well, you wrote it. You were the winner. You got to mold it however you wanted. And so the brothers each are different from obviously the sister in so many ways, but they each have characteristics of wanting riches and wanting a family and wanting a life that's better from where they were. And so that was kind of the foundation that I laid out from the beginning.
So it wasn't your typical traditional South American cartel.
That comes in later.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that comes in later because I wanted there to be, again, like I said, this not just your typical, exactly. Like I didn't want it to just be, this band meets a drug dealer and this drug dealer wants them to traffic drugs. I really wanted it to be this tale of someone looking for riches, but they didn't know where to find it. And through their trials of coming from Europe into America, they meet different people, and each person takes them on a journey where then they eventually all kind of link back up.
And you tied it in with the music business because...
Well, the music business is so secretive.
I've never looked at it that way.
There's so many secrets behind the black curtain, the backstage door, the all-access pass. Everyone wants to know what's back there, and no one does. And when you're an audience member sitting in a dark arena looking at the stage, you don't know what's actually back there. You can use your imagination. And so I painted a different picture for people. What if there was a basement in one of these arenas? What really goes on down there?
Yeah.
What are these trucks really bringing in at 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning when everyone's asleep?
Yeah.
And so I really just was able to take all that secretive stuff and have fun with it.
Did you find in your research and I'm sure you researched a lot of this before you started writing, did you find any truth in this fictional world where you've maybe seen stories that some of these things have actually gone on that really kind of just, it enunciates what you're writing?
Yeah, there's definitely a couple tales out there. Like, so I really tried to stay away from too many shows when I was in the middle of this, because I didn't want to be influenced by another tale or...
Yeah, that makes sense.
And in reality, it was kind of weird once we opened it up and we were done and we were like at a solid foundation of what we had written. My wife and I started to like dabble onto Netflix, and we'd look at like a cartel show. And then we'd realize, oh, wow, they have ties into more things than you think they'd have ties into. And then we'd watch like a documentary about music, and they'd have ties into people that you didn't really think that they'd have ties into. And I guess there is like a story of a manager down from Atlanta that ended up getting caught doing some stuff with drugs and laundering money, but completely separate. Though I think his story was a little more recording studio wise. So
right.
Then
but it's still music industry
still
involved.
music industry involved. But
yeah, and I think at least for the longest time that I can remember, this business has always been cash and carry.
Yeah, and that was some of the greatest stories that were ever told to me were these old production managers that had the briefcase strapped to their hand, handcuffed to their hand.
In fact, I remember doing a series of Hispanic shows in Los Angeles back in the day, and, there'd be 13, 15 bands on stage, on stages at that time. And at the end of the night, when it came time to pay the bills, you walked into the promoter's office and there were paper grocery bags full of money.
Absolutely.
And you turn in your receipt and they dole out the cash and see you at the next show. And so, it wasn't really until probably the last 15, 20 years where we've gone to credit cards and online, it was pretty much a cash and carry basis.
And I got into the industry more for that. I got into it for fun. I was never a tech. I was never a guitar player.
I was going to say, no musical background per se?
I mean, I played the violin when I was young, and the bass, but I absolutely got into this industry just to have fun.
Yeah.
And once it started to really change, like you're talking about, and it was more of an accountant-based system, it was like, I think I'm ready to... And I don't even have the longest career in this industry compared to some. There's people that have been 40 years, 50 years on the road. So I just took my experience and ran.
Let's talk about that for a minute, because when you got on the road touring, and I want to talk more about the book, but when you got on the road touring, you really had no experience at all? Was that just by luck or by fate that you wound up on the road?
So I think I always, like I said, I would watch... Well, growing up in El Paso, Texas, we only got a very select handful of shows that came through.
Right.
And they were always big ones too. And so when I'd see those buses come in, I was so curious about what they did. And so for years, I just never knew that we didn't have a union really. We didn't have all those resources as you would if you worked in New York City, for instance, with Local One. And so I ended up, getting into the restaurant business, as so many people do. And years later, I was like, man, there's something I need that music aspect, because I like music and I love the idea of the live shows. And so I Googled roadie or something like that, or touring, or I can't remember, years later in San Antonio when I worked at Hooters, and Full Sail popped up. And I can still remember my first day in a real audio class, they were like, this is a mic cable, an XLR. And I remember writing down XLR, and they talked about the 3 pins, and I was like, I had all the questions in the world and zero experience, and
about as basic as you could get.
Absolute basic.
Yeah.
And so I just dug my roots, and I ended up getting really lucky with a company in Orlando that the owner just really took to me, and he helped me, guided me, and when it was time to spread my wings, he was like, well, one day you'll walk away from the road. And I was like, never, I never will. I'll die on a bus.
Yeah. Well, I think we all think that at some point.
But it was when I got into Claire, I was still very green compared to so many other people who had either grown up in production families or... And
what's interesting is Claire's been around forever. I mean, they were the big dog, probably still are one of the big dogs in the business.
They are the biggest, and it was eye-opening that productions could even... I was surprised, because I thought I had done a couple big shows in my day, and going to work for them, it was like, oh wow, no, these are some big shows. So yeah, it was cool. But yeah, I was definitely green, and I just kept meeting people and working my way up and doing more shows. And
what was your first tour?
Guns N' Roses was my first.
How did you get that? Was that through Claire?
Yeah, so funny enough, I ended up being a lab instructor at Full Sail for a little bit of time when I was living in Orlando, and one of the other instructors was Axel's monitor engineer, and he would go back and forth from the road and go back to Full Sail to help teach and stuff. And when I got hired, they were doing it was like, because at the time Slash wasn't on and Duff wasn't on, so it was like Axel and some players. I think Dizzy was there. I was supposed to go do something else, and I was so excited about that. And then they called me. They're like, "No, change of plans. You're gonna go do Guns N' Roses in Canada in January." Well, I've never been to Canada, in January.
It's a bit cold and snowy.
It was a shock, to say the least. And come to find out, he had put in a good word. And it was really cool because he did help me on my first tour really understand, all the little nuances, who does what, how to maneuver with these people, because that's what it is. It's a big shaking of the hands every day. Right. You're consistently trying to get your stuff in while also playing friendly with the other guy who's trying to get his stuff in.
Because you all got to work together.
Yeah, and so seeing it from that perspective and looking at it like that, I was like, well, that's a really cool way to go through life, I guess you could think. There's times where you have to stand up for yourself, but then there's also times where you can be friendly. And so writing the book, I think I also tried to play in on those emotions of a person going through trying to make this person happy while also trying to stand up for their own.
We're going to take another break, get another word in for our sponsors, and when we come back, we're going to have some more conversation with Phillip Kriz.
You're listening to the business side of music.
As a musician, you have a dream, that vision of what success looks like for you. Though it's not only about the money, money is a part of it. Whether you've been extremely successful or just striving to maintain a regular cash flow, you need a plan. Money Concepts can help you develop a customized plan to achieve the financial stability and success you want. For over 40 years, Money Concepts has been providing holistic financial planning services to individuals, families, and business owners. As an independent firm, Money Concepts and their associates are committed to always represent the best interest of the client. It's really about independence coupled with committed benevolent interest, which means that they can represent your client, not a product supplier. It's not about selling products. It's about helping you achieve success. To learn how this can benefit you, contact John Adams at 737-867-9309. That's 737-867-9309 for more information.
Whether you consider yourself a musician or not, music is all around us, and it affects our everyday lives. Whether it's background music influencing our shopping habits in a store, organ music adding the vibe to a baseball game, or a playlist convincing us to keep going on that last mile of a run. I'm Mindy Peterson, host of the podcast Enhanced Life with Music, where we take a holistic look at music's benefits through the lens of science and medicine, entertainment, and business. You can find me and Enhance Life with Music at mpetersonmusic.com/podcast or wherever you get your audio.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Back in the studio with Phillip Kriz, who is the author of the Roadie Cartel. It's coming out December 1st of 2023. So if you're listening to this after 12/1, you know it's already out there and you can grab it. It is a fictional novel, although he has taken it some of the storyline based on your years on the road. One of the things I read in your bio is, obviously you worked with Guns N' Roses.
Yep.
From the side of the stage in London, you got to watch them standing on the set of Saturday Night Live with Paul Simon, and you received a signed skateboard from Carrie Underwood. So I got to know about, first of all, you got a signed skateboard. Was that something she was carrying around, or?
Nah, Carrie, that was one of my all-time favorite tours. We're of like the same age, so we just ended up, every time there was an event or something, we would have a beer and a glass of wine at the end of tour party together. And again, I wasn't really in the business to, be everybody's best friend, like that were stars. I didn't really get starstruck over musicians.
Well, and I think being a road dog, and when I say road dog, anything from a production manager, tour manager, down to the set carpenter or the guitar tech, if you get into this business to rub elbows and hobnob with the celebrities, you're in it for the wrong reason.
Yeah, they'll figure you out real quick.
Yeah, they will, and you won't last long.
Yeah, there's always the ones in there, but yeah, I just never did. And so I don't know, me and Carrie would always end up chatting or chit-chatting, and so I would go in and take these photos with her during her like meet and greets, and we always did fun photos. Like I would bring like a family member in or a friend, and then I would ask, hey, you mind if we do like a funny photo? And so we always just kind of had fun. And at the end of the tour, I can't remember if she was signing things for people or signing like a goodbye book or something that they had given. And I didn't have anything except a skateboard. And so I was like, will you sign the skateboard? And, you know, there's like little mementos like that I've collected along the way. And she wrote a real nice message. And yeah, I have it hanging in my son's room. It's pretty cool.
Nice. Yeah, hold on to that.
Yeah.
I don't think there's too many Carrie Underwood signed skateboards out there in the world.
No.
Let's get back to the book, because obviously that's why we're here today. The Roadie Cartel. Are there sub-stories within the stories? You were mentioning something a little bit during the break.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest parts to the book that so many people, me being a roadie, and I said this earlier on the show, everybody expects me to be writing a book about myself, right? The minute you say, oh, I wrote a book, everyone's like, oh, is it about yourself? And so the one thing I've had to really break away from is, well, it's for one, it's not an audio book, because that's what I did forever, right? And for two, it's not an autobiography. It really is a fictional story that I created in my brain and spent the time really writing. And one of the coolest tales out of it was, well, I was given some insight by someone that I really trusted early on when I gave them the book to read, and they said, you should really direct the book. It's a little scattered right now. And I thought that was I was like, okay, thank you. Like,
Hey, you've never written a book before, so
this is my first time, so I really appreciate that. And I did. I took that, I went home, and I ended up adding a chapter. It's 20 chapters now because of that. I directed it through one character. And at first, the character was a male. And it was fine. I thought there was still a lot of substance to it. And I ended up having a baby girl about a year ago with it, and she's just amazing. There's something about it. And as I was finishing the last edit to turn in, like, as a final draft, I hit send. I was working out that next morning, and I was like, I think the main character needs to be a female, because it just her position in the roadie world, it just was going to add that much more texture and that much more oomph to the story.
And it's a different dynamic than what would normally be said.
And it took all the pressure off me too. And it was a really cool way to just express my love for my daughter in a different way, like as if it was a father-daughter tale. So inside this giant tale of this family, these siblings who completely changed the entire, touring and almost music industry through drug trafficking and money laundering, it is a father-daughter tale of this girl seeking revenge for her father's death inside of them. And so there's this inner winding tale as you read it, where you'll start and it'll kind of tell you, and then you'll go back into the storyline, and then it'll bring you back to why you're in that storyline, and then it'll come back out. So it's really fun to go back and rewrite those moments.
Now, is this one of the characters that you originally mentioned that came from Europe?
Her father is one of them, okay. Yes. And her character, Wyatt, she's the actual main character. And so the book starts with her, and the entire story of her father's life and his siblings gets told through her perspective using social media, which in 2009, that's when I really, that's the beginning of the book, I guess you could say, is 2009, and then it goes backwards, right?
I was going to say, how long did you take to write this?
It took me 3 years. Yeah. Almost. So I started in April of 2020, and
right at the peak of COVID.
And I had just, it was one of those moments where I realized, well, I'm not going to tour for quite some time, and
so what am I going to do?
Yeah, and at that time I kind of was like, I don't know if I want to tour anymore. I don't know if I want to go back to it. I don't know how it's going to be. I don't know anything, and so I just took it upon myself to do something different with my life, for one, but with the idea that I've always wanted to do this. And I thought it would be really cool to take ownership of my time.
When the restrictions lifted from the pandemic, did you go back out on the road?
I have been back a few times because people have asked me to go back.
Right.
I actually I was collecting a free check for a while, and I don't know, something about sitting at home writing was fun, but I needed to get out. And so I ended up working for a cabinet delivery store, like a cabinet warehouse here in town, and I was delivering cabinets for like $15 an hour. And on my lunch breaks I would write, and then when I get home I'd write for like 3 or 4 hours, and then I'd wake up in the morning and work out, drive down to Laverne and work. And it was an interesting, and I got many offers to go back out, and I just kept turning them down. And then one day I quit Claire, And I was like, I guess I'm all in. This is it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big leap of faith.
I had to say, you know, my wife, the second I told her the idea, she goes, that's so cool. Do it. She didn't balk at it. She didn't flinch. She didn't do anything except said, do it. And so I said, if she believes in me, and that was the deal we made too. I said, well, don't lie. If the story stinks, you got to tell me. And there was a few times she did.
What was she your biggest critic, you think?
She's definitely has been one of them in the idea that if I thought something, I always brought everything to her. And she was definitely very, this is good, but it can be better. And I love that about it, that everything that we've done up until this point, she's also told me times where like, whoa, I did not see you writing this. And I could always tell too, there was a few times where, you know, like a tear would appear in the corner of her eye and I knew, all right, I think I wrote something real emotional there. But yeah, she was definitely a giant help. Then there was a few other people along the way that helped mold my writing.
This obviously is your literary debut.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see any more books in your future?
Oh, yeah.
Is this going to be a continuing saga, or are you going to be heading in different directions?
This is definitely a 2, and the way that I'm going to release 2 is going to be pretty wild. It'll be fun.
Are you already working on that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is definitely a world tour.
Ah, excellent. How can people find the book?
Well, you can go to phillipjkriz.com. That's my website, and through there you can get on all the social media, you know, Facebooks and Instagrams and stuff. It'll be on, I'm going to put up a link to where you can go directly to, I'm assuming it's going to be like KDP or like Amazon. It's going to be a print on demand type thing at first, and then slowly get into different, hopefully, brick and mortar places. And then we're also doing an audiobook that'll come out in February.
Nice. Who's going to narrate that?
Oh, I got this girl out of New Jersey. Perfect voice. It took a while, and I had a bunch of auditions come in. Hers came in, and I instantly was like, she's the one. And so she's killing it. We talked, actually, she wrote me last night and said she's moving along smoothly, to get her to say she loves the story was, I felt pretty, I didn't even turn the phone to my wife. I said, read this. I'm not crazy, right? But the digital copy and the paperbacks will be out 12/1.
And this book is not just for music lovers or people that like to read thrillers. This is all-encompassing, especially people that have gone through maybe a hard period in their life, I guess.
Yeah, I think that this is one of those tales where, I think for me too, I was going through some stuff when I wrote it. So I think it was very helpful to write down not only my emotions in certain aspects, but like, yeah, if you've lost something, how do you regain it? Or how do you assume to regain it? Or where do you even start? And so I think a lot of the book is a searching tale where you're going through something really, really difficult. And sometimes you think you're going to find it here, and sometimes it's not the case. So
I look forward to reading this. I think it's going to be a great read.
I look forward to you reading it. And you got a little bit of it, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait till the book comes out. Phillip, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Bob.
Here's a shout out to our loyal listeners. Without you, we wouldn't be one of the most listened to music industry interview podcasts in the world, including achieving #1 status in many countries around the world, according to Apple Podcasts. If you enjoy our show, please check out our Facebook page at the Business Side of Music Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and definitely hit the like button. While you're at it, go to our page on YouTube and click on the Business Side of Music Podcast to subscribe. You can check out our webcasts on there. You get to see me and our guests, such as Phillip here in the studio, along with Buddy the Music Dog on occasion, who makes an appearance and then exits. Last but not least, check out and follow us on Twitter at Biz Music Podcast. Until the next time, thanks for tuning in.
The Business Side of Music is the creation of Tom Sabella and Tracy Snow and is produced by Bob Bender. The Business Side of Music is recorded at Music Dog Studios in Nashville, Tennessee. Production sound designed by Keith Stark. Voiceover and promo by Lisa Fuson.